Back here on OBX Today Live, presented by Gallop Funeral Services. And joining us now is our very own Lisa Brickhouse Davis, who you can hear on 99.1 The Sound all the time. And at thousands of other events everywhere. She was hosting with the courthouse sessions, the speaker series for the Dare County Arts Council this past Tuesday with Ruth Wyan. That's Lisa. Yeah. Good morning, Lisa. Thanks for joining us. And tell us more. You have a tie directly to the events of today in 1903. Tell us more about that.
So yes, on this historic day, 118 years ago, my great-great-grandfather, no, he's one great, my great-grandfather, actually Johnny Moore, he was the youngest witness to the first flight. My daughter, Chloe Davis, is going to be out there today with us, and she's the third generation. And I was talking to somebody a little while ago about it, like great-greats. But yeah, my mom, her grandfather, Johnny Moore, was there. He had actually befriended the Wrights when they first started coming down here. He would travel from Collington to the life-saving station and go hang out with the guys there and bring them fish or eggs. And in his routes, he saw two strange men here on the Outer Banks and was thinking, hey, what are these guys doing? And as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, or actually 14, I think, when he first met him, was very curious. And so they had actually told him that if the flag was flying a certain way that they put out, that, just kind of a scarf out there type of thing, then he should try to, come, and they needed as much help as possible. And that day he was walking by and saw that they needed help and went out there, and he went down in the history books.
Now, there's how many living descendants? I mean, he's the last living descendant, right?
He was the youngest witness that day, and because of that, all of the other gentlemen were, 20 to 30, even 40 years his senior. Because he was the youngest witness that day, he also ended up being the last living witness. And he lived back in Collington his whole life. He was barefoot on December 17th, 1903. And, I've been to all these ceremonies for the years. My mom is the historian in our family. She lived with her grandparents, Johnny and Chloe Moore, when her dad was in World War II. And so she, loved them so much and was always a part of the celebration. So she has literally been at every celebration since she was probably 3 or 4 years old. Wow. She was born in 42, and she made it out there with Johnny and Chloe Moore. And he never really, he talked about it, but it wasn't anything of like, guess what I did? People were like, oh my gosh, you're the last living witness to the first flight. How does that feel? Feels great. You want to know the best fishing spot? Slide me a 5 and I'll take you out there. That feels better. That's the stories I've heard about Johnny.
Right.
Not just the great that Mr. Darrell Collins tells every year, which is amazing, talking about Johnny and, all of the Mr. Doe and, take just everybody, Daniels, everybody that had their hand in it on this Outer Banks to make that vision possible right here. It was pretty amazing history, I'd have to say.
Isn't he? He's in one of the photos, isn't he? I've seen. I mean, we all talk about the Daniels photo, the iconic one that we use with all of our stories when we talk about the Wright brothers. Right. But there's several other photos were taken during that flight. And if I believe, I've seen you pop that up on your Facebook from time. And he's in one of those photos, right?
He is now the one that was in the diorama forever. He was actually the one holding up the like 3D diorama, if you remember it. Sam going there like his kids. He was the one like picking up a workbench. He was like a little figure picking it up. As far as the pictures, I think the famous one that people think that is him. I think it was actually Mr. Tate's grandson or something. That was a younger boy holding a fish. Yeah. But Johnny was actually like 16 when he helped. So he was, looked more of like a young man. He is, though, and I'm going to be a little partial, in the bronze statues out there around, he is the coolest one because he's got like nuts to the sky and he's got nuts like this, and then he's barefoot. I mean, it's like, I always joke about like, oh my gosh, how cold it is, on December 17th and how the horrible weather and, the Wright brothers comment about Johnny, he would get cactus in his feet. I mean, he literally was barefoot his whole life. The only time he wore shoes was when he went to Washington, D.C. to meet the president and a formal dinner that was in the 50s. And the count or the community bought him a pair of shoes.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, the Wright brothers said that he would get one of those crazy, cactus or the sand spurs in his feet. And essentially he would just scrape them, like on the dune or on, whatever right next to him. And they said that he was the toughest kid that they had ever met because they couldn't believe that he was tromping around barefoot.
I can imagine them prickly pears. How many times we've been out there on the beach or been somewhere here and prickly pears turned into some type of throwing, like almost like Chinese stars that we threw
Exactly.
camping one time in Salvo.
Exactly.
Just imagine that was what you walked around because that was just native. It's native grass here, and walk around with no shoes and all the time walking on those prickly pears.
We always think about like, wow, December 17th, it was so cold, that day, so windy. Think about the summertime. Like he literally walked the beaches, he'd go from Collington all the way up to the life-saving station up where the Black Pelican is now on the beach, and it's like barefoot. And, in the summertime, you're like trying to be cool. Like I can walk across here without my shoes on. And then all of a sudden you're like, hot potato, like you're running. So yeah, the history of Johnny and all the stories, not just at the Wright Brothers celebration, just that I've heard in my family growing up. You didn't appreciate it as much, or I didn't when I was growing up around here. And then I moved out west. And when people were like, what? Your great grandfather did what? He helped the Wright brothers, a kind of whole, different type of perspective on things. But it's very cool. He, went down in history and he was the youngest one. And he also just, really made a mark in this community. All the stories I've heard about my great grandfather are usually very humorous and good-natured man, and always definitely, good stories that I've heard from Grandpa tell me about the good old days.
Right. Yeah, it was funny. This kind of got spurred out of the fact that I saw a Charlotte TV station did an interview with one of the son of one of with the son of somebody who had helped the Wrights when they were here, and he had shared something, and it was like, I just need to get Lisa on the show to talk about this because, come on. The Senate, and it's, we tie all of ourselves together here, especially with the Wright Brothers celebration. It's a sense of pride, especially those of us who grew up.
Yeah, go out, we're working it, and then I do double duties. Like, let me go place this wreath over here, and right. My grandfather, and then let me do a call into the radio station. We're on here broadcasting live. Thank you, First Flight Society, and the flyovers and all that type of stuff. So
yeah. And it is kind of something we almost take for granted that's here. But then again, I always say that like last year was so special. I thought that we had the Kill Devil Hills did the fireworks on December 17th. I almost wish that would have carried over. That was something I thought was really close. It was something for us, if you will. This always has been a celebration for those of us who grew up here or natives here, the locals. That, this time of year obviously has always been the off season. And this was a celebration, always was kind of geared more towards those of us who grew up here. And, it's always something we held special and even to have that. But you taking a part of it, because you guys explain how that works. You guys with the wreath laying, how exactly does that work?
My mom says, you've got to do this. No,
no, exactly. That's how it works.
Yeah, essentially, everything.
You're going to do this.
But to think back in my years of like seeing and / meeting Buzz Aldrin or John Glenn or Neil Armstrong, because for the 75th anniversary, or I was born in 1970. And so in the 70s, I was coming out here 2, 3, 4, or 5-year-old child. And just, kind of like, who's that person? I didn't, again, really know until later type of things. But yeah, so it's always been a tradition. I mean, this actually dates back to when Johnny was still, some of the actual witnesses were still alive. When they started doing a ceremonial at the Big Boulder, which shows, like where they first started, like, and then the distance, how far they went, the first try and second try. It's out behind where the house is where the Wright brothers, frequented and lived in. But yeah, the First Flight Society has carried on this tradition, and the National Park Service of reaching out to any of the descendants of the witnesses, the 5 local men that were here on that day in 1903, December 17th, and they have asked, they will ask you to come out, and they will call forward, the Doe family, the Daniels family, and then your family, however many generations are there represented, could just be one person there, or several. And then you just go up and place a wreath in honor of, and then of course, Mr. Darrell Collins, that's my memory growing up as a child, is listening to him talk about that day, and just, the excitement of like, Darrell's going to talk again. And it's always a little bit different. It's always the same historical facts, but Mr. Darrell Collins spin on things. But the National Park Service has always done a phenomenal job of, just really letting us see the history that day through words, through, pictures, also just, the inductions of other people that have made a mark. Now, sometimes I'll admit, as a child, sometimes I'm like, what are they talking about? Why are we here?
Yeah.
Who is that person I've never heard of before? But
I want to go inside.
I was a naive, uneducated child at the point about like some of these people that were being, inducted. Like we've got Sally Ride tomorrow, and it's just been amazing to see all these people be honored. Judith Fearing has actually reached out to us as part of the First Flight Society this year to ask, about us doing it. And so we'll have 3 generations out there today. My mom, Karen, Brickhouse, and then my brother, myself, and then my daughter. So we'll have 3 generations, which is pretty special, actually.
Yeah, it is. It is. Lisa Brickhouse Davis here with us on OBX Today Live. And again, we've been showing up the pictures while we've been talking here that you had shared on Facebook this week with your profile picture. And those are pretty cool.
Just me hanging with my great-granddaughter.
Exactly. So whenever you go out there and you see the barefoot and with the knuckles in the sky, that's Lisa's great-grandfather. It's such a great story.
I love it.
It's kind of cool, and both of us growing up in Currituck and the tie there. My dad always talks about that the Wright brothers actually did walk in their front yard. Because the train station, the first time they came to Snowden, and they went to Elizabeth City because the train. They actually at one point stopped in Snowden, got off, and walked to Currituck to get over here, find a different way instead of having to go all the way to Elizabeth City and go down the river and the Sound and across. They were trying to find a shorter route to get from the mainland over to the beach. And that was one of the things
bicycles around here.
No, well, you didn't have a road.
They're like, we can bring our bicycles with us. No.
So, of course, where my parents live now, the road, what is 168 now, was actually closer to their front yard. It didn't run on the same path it does now through Sligo to the bridge. It actually cuts. You can see the path actually behind the brick house that I grew up in and the house that they live in now. You'll see that. And that's where the old roadbed is, and it kind of cuts up to go to Snowden. And Snowden, maybe one person on this thing may know exactly where Snowden. A couple people watching. I know where it is. Yeah, we know where it is in more ways than one. But that's where the train station was. There was a train station in Moyotte. There was a train station in Snowden. There was a train station in Shawboro. And they got off in Snowden, walked over to get to Currituck. That was the closest train station to walk to Currituck, where the courthouse is, to try and find someone to get them down here. And I guess they figured out it was a lot more difficult to do it that way than just going to Elizabeth City. So Dad always talks about, when Wright brothers have walked in our front yard and FDR has driven by our front yard. So all those little pieces of history we've got tied to in one way or another.
And it's a good thing, it's like to hear the stories. And then actually when you hear yourself telling them back to other people, you're like, thanks, Dad, or thanks, Mom, for like, just continuing that tradition of just being proud about where we're from, which is a really cool thing.
All right, Lisa. Well, we're going to let you get at it. Thanks for joining us here on OBX Today Live. Great story, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam. You have a good day.